2019. For those that have not had the pleasure of attending one of these meetings before, a couple of housekeeping items. First of all, if you would silence your cell phones, we'd greatly appreciate that. Also, the way things work, once we call the roll and approve the minutes, city staff will present on an item. Once they're done presenting, it's open it up just to the commission for technical questions. Once we're done with technical questions, we open it up for public comment. Anybody who has a comment or a question can do that. We ask that you step up to the microphone, state your name and address so we have it for the minutes. Once you've said your piece, everybody sits down, and then we close public comment and go on to the commission for a discussion and usually a vote. With that, let us call the roll, Mina.
Kathleen Propp.
Here.
Ed Bowen. Michael Ford. John Hintz.
Here.
John Kiefer.
Here.
Thomas Perry.
Here.
Robert Weigart.
Here.
Andrew Mott. Gary Groth. Thomas Wojtak.
Here. Moving on to the approval of the minutes from April 2nd. Do we have any additions, corrections, deletions to those minutes?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Start with item number 1. Grant privilege in the street and easements for conducting soil boring advances and install monitoring wells within the Court Street, CP Avenue, and Broad Street rights-of-way and Riverside Park Leach Amphitheater properties. Were there any site inspections in that area by us? All right. We accept the staff report as part of the record, and moving on to you guys.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Wisconsin Public Service is requesting approval of a couple of easements and privileges in the street to place monitoring wells and conduct some soil testing. The subject site is the former Oshkosh manufactured gas plant property. It is located on the south side of CP Avenue, which is currently home to Riverside Park, which includes the Leach Amphitheater and other park amenities. The gas plant operated from 1869 through 1946, and then in 2003 the city purchased the property for redevelopment into Riverside Park and the amphitheater. The proposed work is part of an ongoing remedial investigation of the MGP site. Last year, during the reconstruction of Court Street and CP Avenue, there were some adverse soil conditions observed. So the city contacted Wisconsin Public Service, which then coordinated with the United States Environmental Protection Agency to expand the site investigation and to address some data gaps within the site and the public right-of-way. The applicant's proposing to conduct 10 soil borings in the city right-of-way and an additional 7 borings within the Leach Amphitheater property. The privilege request also includes locations of existing monitoring wells in Court Street and Broad Street right-of-ways, and includes existing monitoring wells located within the park property. Up on the screen, I have a whole bunch of different colored dots, and I'll explain them here. The soil borings are all the locations with the pink dots. These are all proposed borings that will occur once this is approved. 2 of the soil borings are planned or proposed to be converted into monitoring wells. The 2 of them are located on the west right-of-way line within the west right-of-way terrace of Court Street. The orange dots are locations of existing monitoring wells, which this action will grant easements. It's kind of an after the fact situation, but these are just locations of existing monitoring wells. And lastly, the applicant wants to, or is mapping what's called contingency step-out areas. And these areas are located within the terrace areas of CP Avenue and Court Street. And these areas are being requested in case that they need to better define the underground plume leaving the amphitheater site. So they're just asking or getting pre-approval for additional soil borings along these terrace areas. Now, all the work is within the right-of-way. It's all going to be conducted within the street terraces, so none of the sidewalk or street pavement will be disturbed. The Department of Public Works will be approving or is reviewing and will approve the final locations of the borings and the location of the monitoring wells, as well as approve the monitoring wells and soil borings when they're properly abandoned per city guidelines. So with that, the Attorney's Office has been working with Wisconsin Public Service to prepare easement documentations and the privilege request documentations, and I believe they're very close to finalizing that. And those documents will be recorded at the Register of Deeds once approved by the Common Council. Next maps, these are the maps that were submitted by WPS's consultant. The one on the left showing the proposed soil boring locations and the contingency areas, which are the hatched areas, and the two monitoring well sites, or the borings that will be converted into monitoring well sites on the west side of Court Street. And the map on the right shows those borings in addition to additional borings which would be located within the Leach Amphitheater and Riverside Park properties. And this last map here submitted it shows the locations of the existing monitoring wells within the park property and within the Broad Street property, and then the two new ones on Court Street, and then a monitoring well on the north of CP Avenue on Court Street. With that, staff is recommending approval of the easement request and the privilege request with several conditions. It's been a while since we've had a privilege request, but there's traditionally, I think we had 9 or 10 in the past. But they've been increased to 12 with just recent policy changes. I won't read them through them all. They're all located within your staff report. There was just some wording changes for the very first condition, just some wordsmithing, but otherwise, staff is recommending approval for this request as proposed.
Thank you, sir. Any technical questions for city staff? Right, seeing none, anyone here from the public to speak to this item today? Okay, seeing none, back to the commission.
Make a motion to adopt the findings and recommendations as stated in the staff.
Second. All right. Any discussion? Seeing none, call a roll.
Crop,
Aye.
Bowen,
Aye.
Ince,
Aye.
Kiefer,
Aye.
Perry,
Aye.
Weigart,
Aye.
Wojtek.
Aye.
Motion carried 7-0.
Moving on to item number 2, residential design standards variance to allow window area reductions and closures on the front facade at 2038 Roosevelt Street. Anybody do a site inspection on this one? Okay. We accept the staff report as part of the record, and it's up to you, Stephen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this item is a design standards variance request for window area reductions and closures on a residential property up on Roosevelt. You can kind of see in blue there the subject site. So there's kind of some mixed uses here. Most of what's immediately around this site is residential. This is a single-family residential property we're looking at. A vacant lot here that's could be a residential lot, conceivably. This is another vacant lot, I believe, here. And then there's some single and I think 2-family residential immediately around. So just kind of looking at the aerial there, you can kind of see where we are and the scale of some of that. What we're looking at here. Just showing again the land use. So some single and 2-family. I think this is commercial up here. There's some commercial there, cemetery over to the west, and then a lot of residential to the east. For anybody watching, it's kind of good practice to refresh everybody on what the applicable code references are. So there's really 2 that are governing here and that we have to be aware of. Section 30-241, B1. That's the one that seems to be the biggest hang-up for a lot of people when they try to do work on front facades. Basically, it prohibits closing of existing window openings on front facades, including gables. You can reduce windows by 10% in terms of area if you can't get comparable windows to fit into the opening that exists. But by and large, that provision remains in force generally. And then section 30-241 D6B really gets at a minimum percentage of required area being devoted to glazing. And for residential properties, a minimum of 25% of the wall space has to be devoted to window or door openings. The intent of these ordinance provisions is really to prevent blank monotonous facade regions. So just keep those in mind as we go forward. Here is the property that we are looking at. This is what it looked like last year, I believe. This Google Street View is from a few years back, but it pretty recently, or up until pretty recently, it looked like this. You know, pretty nondescript, not anything too unique about it. So you can see some of the windows here that are there, and then what was the existing siding at the time. This porch overhang that was there, and then the porch stoop there, so you can kind of see what it looked like. This is just looking at some of the context. So if you're looking from almost at Algoma, looking on Roosevelt to the east, you can see some of these properties here. I believe this is our subject property, perhaps when it was being worked on. And then you look down, it's a little bit hard to see some of the other residential properties with the trees there and the foliage, but we'll see some of those here. These are a couple of the properties across the street to the south, I believe. So you can kind of get a sense of the scale there. This is an eagle view aerial of our subject property, so one of the better aerial images that we have access to. As I mentioned, you can see some of these surrounding properties, and then the cemetery there to the west, residential properties to the east. This is the before and after. So basically what the applicant did was the applicant was sent a correction notice for a violation on this property because planning services staff was made aware of work being done without a permit, or work that had been done without a permit, I should say. The applicant, I believe, obtained a siding permit to re-side this house, but in the process closed off a number of these window openings and moved the door over, as you can see. The overhang was removed, the siding was redone, and you could make the case or the argument that it does look better. But you can see too, you know, like I said, you know, some of these windows were reduced, some of them were closed. This one was reduced. This one I think was in a stairwell, and the applicant cited safety concerns for having closed this one off. So you can see that that one's no longer there. And then one of these was gone completely, and I think one was shifted. And this front porch stoop was reconstructed, it looks like. This landing it looks like of wood. No railing, at least as of this image. I don't know if there's one currently, but you can see that the overhang is no longer there. And so there's larger regions of blank wall or facade space there. I believe the applicant, from my calculations, based on the window areas that were, or dimensions that were given to us, I believe they were at about 7.5% area in terms of glazing windows and doors, if we count the door, for the front facade there. So 7.5%, a minimum of 25% is required by code. I believe this, if I remember correctly, was a kitchen window, kitchen dining room area. This was a bedroom up here. This was a bathroom. And then this one, I believe, was another bedroom. The applicant can correct me if I'm incorrect. So yeah, basically the work was done without a permit. Planning services staff issued a correction notice, told the applicant that you can either restore the window and door openings as they were before or obtain a design standards variance. So the applicant filed for a design standards variance. We as staff looked at a number of things. We looked at the intent of the ordinance sections that I mentioned. You know, most importantly, preventing blank monotonous facades, trying to have some kind of articulation or some kind of differentiation there, some glazing area. We also looked at the fact that the work had been done without a permit, and then the information, the state of the information provided by the applicant. The applicant did provide window area, or dimensions, I should say, as I mentioned before, for these windows here. We don't know what the previous dimensions were, so I was not able to do a comparison in terms of total area from before to what it is now. We usually like to do that. I know you all have asked for that in the past. We also did not get to meet with the applicant on site. So we potentially could have had more information if we could have done that. We feel as staff that this work disrupts the balance of the front facade. You know, it wasn't particularly beautiful before, but seeing that like the overhang is gone, a lot of the windows are either reduced or closed. We don't see any other articulation, any shutters or any other features perhaps that could break this up. So right now, we are recommending denial of this request in lieu of having some of that, some kind of additional, something to be able to justify some give and take here in terms of why we would grant a variance.
All right, technical questions. Go ahead, Ed.
You can't hazard a guess based on the elevation in that sort of pre-construction picture what the percentage might be?
I don't know if it maybe be 15, just throwing something out there. Rough guess, or guess, I should say.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Maybe.
visibly less. I mean, so,
Yeah.
you know, I understand that. I'm just kind of trying to understand, you know, was it within spitting distance of that 25 beforehand, or was it kind of really not there to begin with, which sort of, I mean, obviously it's a little different.
Yeah.
And I guess we've obviously had a lot of these before. And the common theme is, you know, work done without a permit or work done without a proper permit or something like that, which I guess I'm a little curious, how does inspection services, somebody comes in for a siding permit, which is what you said happened here, do they provide this information when somebody comes in for something that might dovetail with something like this? Do they provide that information and say, hey, you're doing this work, there's some other stuff that you may want to think of as you're doing, you know, exterior improvements? Don't close up window. You're going to do siding, that's great, do your siding, but don't close up the windows. Are they required to provide a drawing for things like this when it's a siding permit?
For
Or is
siding,
it just
no.
kind of, hey, we're re-siding it, and then if they choose to close window openings and do that sort of stuff while they're doing the siding,
Yes.
I do wonder if it might not hurt in the future to have inspection services provide some sort of.
This is what siding
It's
means.
it's at least a disclaimer saying, you know, hey, if you're going to do something to the exterior of your house, be advised that these regulations apply. Because I do think that, you know, there are some people who just don't follow the ordinance, but there are some people who just don't know. And part of it is that, you know, I know we think that everybody pays attention to the very important work that we do. Let's be really honest. I don't know. So there are people who just aren't aware that these regulations are out here. I guess I don't think that's neither here nor there as it relates to this particular request, because again, done without permits, it's hard to have too much sympathy for that, but it probably couldn't hurt to have inspection services be a little more cognizant, a little more proactive about
For sure.
how they deal with, you know, any type of exterior requests and permits and things like that. Just give them a form, I don't know, something like that.
Well, we use a form, we use a similar form. We have a sign-off form on zoning that they're going to comply with our ordinance.
Yeah, I know, there's just, you get into these more sort of pro forma type building permit requests, like a siding thing where, again, you don't have to provide a drawing, you just say, hey, I'm gonna re-side the house.
And you don't have,
Give you a permit. It can't hurt for inspection services to maybe,
and I don't believe you need to show up in person for a siding permit or a roofing permit, things like that.
oh, really?
I think we can do those.
Shows you how much roofing or siding I've done.
I was
to
gonna
my
say, and on
house.
top of what you're saying, most people when they side, they redo windows. So,
Yeah.
so they're, you know what I mean? That's where I'm getting where you're coming from on
Yeah.
that.
And I would think, you know, some of the contractors are well aware that, you know, they can't do that. I know you guys have been, you know, done a pretty good job reaching out to some of, even the smaller contractors are aware of it. They complain about it all the time. But, you know, the individual homeowner who's doing this work themselves, you know, is going to be caught flat-footed if they say, hey, I'm re-siding my house, and then as part of that, they decide to do it. And so, again, might be a moot point for this particular item, but it is something that is maybe worth a little bit of conversation with inspectors.
Excellent. Other technical questions, comments? Go ahead, John.
I just wanted to say, had they come to us beforehand with this, with that stairwell window, I don't think any of us would have had a problem. That just looks awkward.
Goofy.
Yeah. Had they come to us beforehand, I'm not, justifying what's been done now. I'm just saying that that's probably one we probably all would have looked at and said, that looks out of place. So at least kind of in taking that into consideration under this.
Other technical questions? Okay, seeing none. Anyone here from the public to speak to this item today? Come on up, sir. If you could step up to the microphone, state your name and address so we have it for the minutes.
Right there.
That's all right.
You get the podium.
My name is Jesse Williams. I own the property at 2038 Roosevelt. The variance, I did not know that I needed a variance to board up windows. As far as for the windows, I should have gotten a permit for it, and I didn't. I take responsibility for that. I should have. I just got busy and trying to get the house done before winter. The front steps is going to get changed. I removed the old stoop because we did dig up around the basement because it did leak. And so we did coat the basement. I did get a permit for that. I did a liquid rubber coating on it and then a plastic wrap around the basement to keep it from leaking. So we had to remove the front stoop. I do plan on building a new one on there and getting a permit for it, but we have to wait until the ground thaws so that we can pour the footers. I would like to put an overhang roof back above that door. Again, I got to get the building permit for it. We did move the door because it was a smaller 30-inch wide door that walked into the basement staircase, and you had to cut the top corner of the door off just to make it work. So it wasn't an insulated door, it was a wood door that was shot. So I wanted to put a door in that would look nicer for the front, for one thing. And I don't know. I'm trying to make the house look better. I really am.
Thank you. Hold on. Any questions for the petitioner?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there a possibility that if we laid this over, you could work with staff and talk about putting in another window, like on the left side there, or doing something
I mean,
to improve it?
we could.
To come closer to code?
We could. The reason is too is we don't have much wall space in there. If you look on the other side of that end of the house, there's another window. On the back of the house, there's a patio door, and that room is only 19 by 23, and you got a living room, kitchen, and dining room all in one room. So you're kind of limited on wall space. I mean, if we have to, we could, but we'd have to tear everything apart again.
I'm just wondering if you can cut into the
Well, we'd have to.
siding at the right point, and then you're not ruining all your siding.
Yeah, and then the inside, we'd have to cut out all the drywall and everything else again too, and redo everything, and be starting over. But if that's what we have to do, I'd hate to do it. It'd cost a lot of money, and I'm trying to finish the outside of it, the rest of it.
Other questions for the petitioner as long as he's here? Okay, thank you, sir. Anyone else here to speak to this item today? Okay, then we'll close public commentary and go back to the commission.
Question, if he doesn't comply and we take your recommendations, what's his alternative?
If he doesn't comply, well, then we start to issue citations, and we go the court route. That's the alternative. The other alternative is what we always try and do here, and Kathy is always very good at trying to bridge that gap and get us to come together on a consensus on something by laying it over and talking to the applicant about is there anything else that we can do.
I guess that's what I'd like to try.
We've had some thoughts. I mean, I think Stephen and I and staff have sat down and we've looked at it. Could we add shutters to break it up or add some
Yeah, that
feature
would
to
help.
it? I think one of the windows that's causing us some concern at this point is probably this one. So you lose some of the symmetry. So this one pops up. You know, if this one had been put down here, you'd still get some of that symmetry back in the front of the house. I think our biggest concern is we went from roughly 15% to about 7%. You know, and our code is 20, we've been pretty good at trying to get it up to 25%. Now, we know that it wasn't at 25%, but we went at something that's 15 and cut it in half. So I think that's, you know, that's a major concern. So what can we do architecturally to try and get it there? We can work. We need to get over there, you know, we need to look at how those rooms function. Like you said, you know, we need to look at the wall space and kind of evaluate that. We're just looking at it on the outside. We're looking at the outside facade going, from our standpoint, if we don't know what the interior looks like, how can we make this recommendation to try and, you know, find that. So, you know, what you're suggesting is something that I think we'd like to do to see if we can find a solution. It's going to take two sides here to get that to work. We may say this has got to be lowered. That might be the simplest solution, but we need to see what's on the other side of that wall to figure out, because we've done this before. Remember somebody put a kitchen sink in there, or was it a kitchen counter?
Yeah, I think
counter.
on Bent, when we had that, and it really helped when we got to go out there, meet with the owner, and we were able to see what was going on, and then come up with a solution that worked for us and for her. I think he mentioned for that smaller window, I think the toilet might be right under that. I think that's a bathroom there.
That's what was in the report.
Yeah, so I mean, I can see why it's smaller, but at the same time, yeah, it does help to be able to go and see what's going on site there. If we can do that as staff, meet with the applicant and discuss it, I think that really helps us.
At the end of the day, we're still sitting at, you know, 7%. We shifted it down from 7%. You know, the alternative is, like Bob said, we're going to go the court route, and we don't want to. We would like to avoid that.
Yeah.
If we can find an acceptable solution to the group.
Well, I guess I'd like to suggest, and the applicant has another opportunity to respond to this, doesn't he?
Yep. According
I'd
to
like to suggest that you and staff, that we lay this over, and you and staff meet, and you let them come in and see if we can work something out, so that you don't have to we don't want to go to court. No. You know, we want this thing to work, so see if there's some sort of acceptable alternative.
We're good at trying to find that.
It isn't so hard on
that.
you, but yet we get something, frankly, it's pretty stark now. When I drove out there, you know, it's kind of like, okay.
Thomas. Yeah.
So just to be clear, if we approve your recommendation to deny, that ends it, and we would have to, if you came to an agreement, we would likely see it again because it would need to be reapproved by this board, correct? So
Correct.
there would be a new filing fee.
Yeah.
New application.
Correct.
Because if we approve the denial, then it's done.
Done.
And we have to start all over again, and the homeowner has to start all over again with the costs associated with the application.
Correct.
Yeah.
What you said just confused me. But if we lay it over, there's no additional filing fee. is there?
No, if we lay it over, it's
It's the same
yeah, it's
application.
still
That's
moving
what
forward.
that's why he was asking.
If we
Okay.
deny it, it's done. It's a done deal from a administrative standpoint because you've denied it.
Yeah, okay, good.
Any other discussion? Am I hearing a motion boiling amongst the?
I move that we lay this over so applicant can work with staff.
I'll second that.
Any discussion on that motion?
I have a second here.
All right, call them.
Oh,
Wait, pardon me.
I thought, don't we open it up? Do we open it up in a layover or not? I thought we opened back up to the
Because there
applicant.
was a motion.
Sure, well, go ahead.
You have anything to add, sir? All right. Thank you.
Sure.
All right, so let's call the roll now.
All right, Propp,
Aye.
Bowen,
Aye.
Hintz,
Aye.
Kiefer,
Yeah, this is a later.
Harry,
Aye.
Weigert,
Aye.
Wojtek.
Aye.
Motion to lay over,
Oh,
carries
Let's
7-0.
do that for 4 weeks, 2 meetings. Let's do it for a maximum
Oh,
of 2
yeah.
meetings. We'll put it on
Okay.
the second meeting, just so we have a date on it. We want to keep
Okay.
this
2 meetings.
Yeah, if we
Okay.
don't have something done by then, we report to you and say, we couldn't work something out yet.
Okay.
But we want to keep it on schedule.
Okay, so that's the end of business.
May
Do
21.
we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, now we move on to a very interesting work.